Have you ever spent your entire life supporting someone, only to realize they've written you out of their story? I have. It was supposed to be one of the most beautiful celebrations of sisterhood. My younger sister Rachel's wedding. Cathedral. Ceilings, cascading orchids, a string quartet playing softly in the background. Everything was picture perfect. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Everyone beamed with pride except me. I'm Jessica. I'm 34, a kindergarten teacher, a mother of 2, a wife, a daughter, a sister. But that day, I was nobody. Just a face in the crowd at the edge of the reception hall. No acknowledgment in the maid of honor speech, no mention in the toasts, no seat at the head table. When I finally gathered the courage to ask my mother where my sons and I should sit, she barely made eye contact. She just whispered sharply, "Just try to keep the boys quiet during the speeches, Jessica. Rachel's big day isn't the time for disruptions." Disruptions? That's what my children and I had become to my own family. I bit my lip, fighting back tears that threatened to spill. I wouldn't let my boys see me cry. Not today. Ethan was only 8 and Luke just 6, both standing beside me in their little navy suits we'd spent weeks picking out. Ethan kept fidgeting with his bow tie while Luke clutched the handmade card he'd created for Auntie Rachel and Uncle David. They had been counting down the days until the wedding. Ethan had even memorized a short poem he wanted to recite to Rachel. Luke had practiced his very best handwriting on the card, wanting it to be perfect for his favorite aunt. I knelt down and straightened Ethan's bow tie, smoothing Luke's wild curls back from his forehead. I forced a smile, tight and unconvincing, and said, "We're going to have an amazing time tonight, guys. There's cake and dancing later." But inside, my heart was crumbling, because it didn't matter how enthusiastically I smiled. It didn't matter that I'd been the one who held Rachel's hand through every panic attack before big dates with David, stayed up until 3 a.m. helping her redesign wedding invitations when the first batch wasn't perfect, or drove 5 hours to help her find the right wedding shoes. None of it mattered now. The wedding photographer was arranging the family for portraits near the grand staircase. Rachel stood radiant in her gown, a vision in ivory lace. David gazed at her adoringly, his hand resting gently on her waist. My mother, Eleanor, fussed with Rachel's veil, making sure each crystal sparkled in the soft lighting. My father, Robert, stood tall and proud beside them, chest puffed out slightly in his tailored suit. Bridesmaids in matching sage green dresses clustered on one side, groomsmen in dark suits on the other. And there I was, standing with my boys off to the side, watching, waiting for someone to say, "Jessica, bring the boys and join us." Waiting for someone to acknowledge we existed. They didn't. The photographer gestured impatiently, shooing away anyone not in the immediate wedding party. I opened my mouth to speak up, but Eleanor shot me a warning glance that silenced me instantly. Ethan tugged at my sleeve. "Mom, why aren't we in the pictures? We're family too, right?" he whispered, confusion clouding his innocent face. I crouched down to his level, my throat tight with emotion. "Sometimes we just get to watch and cheer from the sidelines, sweetie. And that's special too." The lie tasted bitter on my tongue. I plastered on another fake smile and clapped my hands together with forced enthusiasm. "Who wants to explore the garden? I heard there's a fountain with fish." But as I guided them away, I noticed Luke looking back over his shoulder, hurt and confusion written across his small face as he clutched his handmade card tighter. I should have left. I should have gathered my boys and walked out of that reception hall with our dignity intact. But some desperate, hopeful part of me wanted to believe things would improve as the evening progressed, that Rachel would notice us, that someone, anyone, would acknowledge our presence. I didn't know then that it wouldn't be me who changed everything. It would be Ethan, my 8-year-old son who recognized the injustice no one else dared to name. And just when my sister's maid of honor was about to conclude her speech, Ethan did something I will never forget. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Growing up, I always knew my place in the family hierarchy. I was the reliable one, the responsible one, the supporting character in the narrative that always starred Rachel. My younger sister, Rachel, was the golden child. She had the magnetic personality, the effortless charm, the constant stream of praise from relatives. And I was the one who stood just outside the spotlight, applauding louder than anyone. I never resented her. Not in the beginning. I believed that's just how families worked. Someone had to be the foundation, the steady presence, the one who picked up the pieces quietly, the one who celebrated others' achievements even when no one celebrated theirs. Our mother, Eleanor, made the division clear from early on. When Rachel forgot her science project, it was my fault for not reminding her. When Rachel broke curfew, I was lectured for not being a better influence. When Rachel landed her first marketing job out of college, we had a champagne dinner. When I earned my teaching certification after years of night classes while working full-time, we had our regular Tuesday family dinner with barely a mention. I convinced myself it didn't matter. I told myself recognition didn't have to be public. Love didn't always announce itself with fanfare, but as we grew older, the gap between Rachel and me only widened. I married James, my college sweetheart, in a simple ceremony at the local botanical garden. We had Ethan 2 years later, followed by Luke. We bought a modest home in the suburbs, where I balanced teaching kindergarten with raising our boys. Meanwhile, Rachel thrived in the city, climbing the corporate ladder at a prestigious marketing firm, dating a series of increasingly successful men, and documenting her glamorous life on social media. Every time she posted photos from exotic vacations or exclusive restaurants, Eleanor would call me, not to check on the boys or ask about my classroom, but to marvel at how absolutely fabulous Rachel's life was looking. Still, I remained devoted to family. No matter how unbalanced it felt, I showed up. Every birthday, every holiday, every crisis when Rachel needed a shoulder to cry on after another relationship ended. Because that's what family means to me. You show up, even when they don't always show up for you. When Rachel announced her engagement to David, a successful surgeon she'd been dating for just over a year, it didn't surprise me that I heard the news through our mother. Not directly from my sister, despite the fact that I'd talked her through her insecurities about the relationship just weeks before. "Your sister is getting married," Eleanor practically sang through the phone. "David proposed at the symphony. Gala last night. The ring is absolutely stunning. 3 carats at least." I swallowed my hurt and sent Rachel a warm congratulatory text. 3 days passed before she responded with a simple, "Thanks, crazy busy with planning already." I offered my help. She didn't acknowledge the offer. The official wedding invitation arrived addressed only to the Morgan family, with no specific mention of James, the boys, or me. When I gently pointed this out to Eleanor, she brushed it aside. "Don't be so particular, Jessica. Of course, you're all invited." Rachel just has a certain aesthetic she's going for with the invitations. A week before the wedding, I called Eleanor to confirm details, where we should be when, if the boys needed to participate in any way, what our roles would be. That's when she sighed heavily and said, "Just make sure the boys don't get underfoot during the important moments, Jessica. Rachel's hired a very expensive videographer, and she wants everything to be perfect." I sat frozen, phone pressed to my ear as my mother continued. "Maybe consider leaving early if they get tired. Children can be so disruptive at elegant affairs." Disruptive. My sons, Rachel's only nephews, whom she'd seen perhaps 3 times in the past year despite living just 40 minutes away, were potential disruptions to her perfect day. I nearly said we wouldn't come. I nearly hung up and protected my children from the inevitable hurt of being treated as inconvenient accessories. But then I looked across the kitchen where Ethan and Luke sat at the table, carefully coloring homemade cards for Auntie Rachel and Uncle David. They were so excited about dressing up in fancy clothes and going to a real princess party. How could I take that away from them? So I told Eleanor we would be there, well-behaved and on time. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear. The boys woke up early, too excited to sleep. Ethan stood patiently as James helped him with his bow tie. Luke kept spinning in circles to make his jacket flare out, giggling uncontrollably. "Are we going to sit at a special table, Mom?" Ethan asked as I combed his hair. "I'm not sure about the seating arrangements, buddy," I answered carefully. "But we'll have a good time wherever we sit." "Will Auntie Rachel be happy with our cards?" Luke wondered, holding up his creation with its slightly crooked hearts and glitter that hadn't quite dried. "She's going to love them," I assured him, though a knot formed in my stomach. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I assured him, though a knot formed in my stomach. Would Rachel even take a moment to acknowledge their efforts? We arrived at the grand historical mansion where the ceremony was being held an hour early, as requested by the wedding coordinator. The grounds were stunning. Manicured gardens, a stone fountain, ivy-covered walls. It looked like something from a fairy tale. Inside, staff bustled about with last-minute preparations. Florists arranged towering centerpieces of white roses and orchids. The string quartet warmed up in the corner. Everything exuded perfection and expense. I spotted Eleanor directing a waiter about champagne distribution. She caught sight of us and hurried over, her designer dress rustling. "You're here. Good," she said, giving me a quick air kiss near my cheek. She barely glanced at James or the boys. "Jessica, the bridesmaids are upstairs with Rachel if you want to say hello before things start. But don't stay long, she's very nervous, and the makeup artist needs concentration." I thought I might help, I offered. I brought the emergency kit Rachel asked for, safety pins, stain remover, extra bobby pins. Eleanor took the small bag from my hands. "I'll bring this up. Why don't you find your seats? The ceremony starts in 45 minutes. And just like that, I was dismissed. No invitation to see my sister before her wedding, no acknowledgement of my efforts, no role whatsoever. James squeezed my hand comfortingly. "It's okay," he whispered. "Let's get settled with the boys." We found seats near the back of the ceremony area, not with family, not even close. As guests began to arrive, I watched as distant cousins were ushered to the front rows. Friends from Rachel's college days were seated prominently. Even David's former roommate's parents got better placement than we did. The ceremony itself was beautiful, I have to admit. Rachel looked radiant as our father walked her down the aisle. David's face lit up when he saw her. Their vows were personal and touching. I clapped and smiled along with everyone else, genuinely happy for my sister despite everything. But when the officiant announced, "I now present the new Mr. and Mrs. Bennett," and the recessional music swelled, Rachel and David walked past our row without even a glance in our direction. Not even a smile of acknowledgement. The reception was held in the mansion's grand ballroom. Crystal chandeliers hung from coffered ceilings. Each table featured elaborate floral centerpieces that must have cost more than our monthly mortgage payment. A jazz band played softly as guests found their assigned seats. We were directed to a table in the far corner, next to the kitchen doors. Our table mates were David's elderly great-aunt, a couple who worked with David but clearly weren't close friends, and the videographer's assistant who needed somewhere to sit when not working. A leftover table if ever there was one. Ethan looked around in confusion. "Mom, where's Grandma and Grandpa? Aren't we sitting with them?" I swallowed hard. "They're sitting at the head table with Auntie Rachel and Uncle David, sweetie." "But we're family too," Luke stated with the simple logic of a 6-year-old. James jumped in before I had to answer. "Hey, looks like they have those fancy sparkling grape juices for you guys." Should we try them? I sent him a grateful look as he distracted the boys, but the knot in my chest only tightened. Throughout dinner, I watched as Rachel moved from table to table, greeting guests, accepting congratulations, posing for photographs. She never came to our table, not once. Eleanor and Robert circulated as well, playing the proud parents, accepting compliments on their younger daughter's beauty and success. They, too, bypassed our corner entirely. When it was time for toasts, the maid of honor, Rachel's college roommate Vanessa, clinked her glass and stood. A hush fell over the room. I settled back, prepared to at least enjoy hearing stories about my sister. Perhaps some anecdotes from their shared apartment days or Rachel's journey to finding David. Vanessa's speech started well enough. She spoke about meeting Rachel in their freshman dorm, about their instant connection, about watching Rachel grow into a confident, successful woman. But then she began speaking about Rachel's family. Rachel has always had the most amazing support system, Vanessa gushed. Her incredible parents, Eleanor and Robert, who have championed her every dream and ambition from day one. Eleanor and Robert beamed from the head table. And of course, Rachel's extended family and friends who have been like siblings to her throughout her life. I felt like I'd been slapped. Extended family? Friends who were like siblings? I am her sister. Her only sister. I sat there, frozen, as Vanessa continued, listing various friends who had been there for pivotal moments in Rachel's life. Moments I had often been part of, or even orchestrated behind the scenes. Not once did Vanessa mention me. Not once. Did she acknowledge that Rachel had an actual sister sitting in the room? It was as if I had been completely erased from Rachel's narrative. I glanced at the head table. Rachel was smiling, nodding along. Eleanor and Robert looked perfectly content. No one seemed to notice or care about the glaring omission. I felt James's hand cover mine on the table. He knew. He understood exactly what was happening. His eyes reflected a mixture of anger and sympathy that nearly broke my composure. "Mommy, why is that lady not talking about you?" Luke whispered, loudly. "You're Auntie Rachel's sister." Several heads turned toward our table. I felt heat rise to my cheeks. "Shh, it's okay," I whispered back. "Sometimes people just forget things." Ethan was frowning deeply, his young face surprisingly stern. He looked from me to the head table and back again, processing something in his thoughtful way. As Vanessa concluded her toast to thunderous applause, I excused myself to the restroom. I needed a moment alone, a chance to breathe, to pull myself together. I locked myself in a stall and finally let the tears fall, silent and hot, down my cheeks. Who cries at their sister's wedding? I thought bitterly. Only someone who has been made to feel like a ghost in their own family. After a few minutes, I splashed cold water on my face, reapplied my lipstick, and straightened my shoulders. I had 2 little boys out there watching me. I would not let them see how deeply this hurt. When I returned to the table, James looked concerned. "You okay?" he murmured. I nodded, not trusting my voice. "Mom," Ethan said quietly, "I need to use the bathroom too." "I'll take him," James offered, but Ethan shook his head. "I can go by myself. I saw where it was when we came in." I hesitated. "Are you sure, buddy? It's a big place." "I'm 8, Mom. I'm not a baby," he insisted with such determination that I relented. "Okay, but come straight back." He nodded, solemnly, and walked away, surprisingly purposeful for a child his age. I watched him go, then turned my attention to Luke, who was now yawning despite his best efforts to hide it. "Tired, little man?" I asked, running a hand through his curls. "No," he protested unconvincingly. "I want to see Auntie Rachel open our cards." My heart squeezed painfully. "We'll make sure she gets them. I promise." The DJ announced that the father-daughter dance would begin shortly. Robert stood, buttoning his jacket, preparing to take Rachel onto the dance floor. Eleanor beamed proudly from her seat. I realized, with a start, that Ethan had been gone nearly 10 minutes. I scanned the ballroom but didn't see him anywhere. "James, I'm going to check on Ethan," I said, rising from my chair. "Want me to go?" he offered. "No, stay with Luke. I'll be right back." I made my way toward the restrooms, weaving through tables of laughing, chatting guests. No sign of Ethan there. I checked both the men's and women's restrooms, calling his name. Nothing. A flutter of panic began in my chest. Where could he have gone? The mansion was huge, with multiple rooms and corridors. Had he gotten lost? Just then, I noticed a small commotion near the DJ booth. My heart nearly stopped. There was Ethan, standing on tiptoes, speaking intently, to the DJ. The man was nodding, looking somewhat confused, but also amused. He bent down to Ethan's level, said something, then straightened up and began adjusting his equipment. I rushed over, mortified and concerned. "Ethan, what are you doing?" He turned to me, his young face set with determination I'd never seen before. "Mom, it's okay. I'm fixing it." "Fixing what, honey? You can't just bother the DJ. Let's go back to our table." I reached for his hand, but he stepped back, shaking his head. "No, Mom. They forgot about you. All of them. And it's not right." Before I could respond, the DJ's voice boomed through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, before we move on to the father-daughter dance, we have a special request from a young man who would like to share something important with the bride and groom." The ballroom fell silent. All eyes turned toward us. I felt the blood drain from my face as the DJ handed Ethan a microphone. Rachel stood from the head table, confusion written across her perfectly made-up face. "What's going on?" she mouthed, to Eleanor, who looked equally bewildered. Ethan took the microphone, his small hand gripping it tightly. His voice, when he spoke, was clear and steady, carrying through the silent room. "Hi, everyone. I'm Ethan. I'm 8. And Auntie Rachel is my mom's sister." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Rachel's expression shifted from confusion to something unreadable. "My mom's name is Jessica," Ethan continued. "Nobody said her name today. Not in the speech, not in the thank yous. Nobody put our picture in the slideshows. Nobody let us sit with our family." Oh God. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst through my chest. I should stop him. I should take the microphone away. But I stood frozen, unable to move. But that's not right. Ethan's voice grew stronger. "Because my mom is the best sister ever, and I have proof." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small device. With a child's clumsiness but absolute determination, he held it up to the microphone. "I found Mom's old phone in her drawer when I was looking for batteries for my game. It has recordings on it. Listen." He pressed a button, and suddenly, Rachel's voice filled the ballroom through the speakers. "Jess, it's me. I know it's late, but I just had the worst fight with David. I don't know if we're going to make it. Can you come over? I need you. You're the only one who understands." I gasped. That call had come at 2 a.m., 6 months before the engagement. I had driven through a thunderstorm to sit with Rachel in her apartment, talking her through her fears until sunrise. Ethan pressed another button. "Jessica, it's Rachel. The caterer just canceled. Mom's freaking out and I can't handle her right now. Can you call around and find someone else? I know it's your anniversary weekend, but this is an emergency." I remembered that weekend clearly. James and I had canceled our planned getaway so I could help Rachel salvage her engagement party. One more recording played. "Hey Jess, it's me again. Thank you so much for staying up all night helping me address those invitations. I know I was a total bridezilla about the handwriting. You're literally saving my sanity through this whole wedding thing. I don't tell you enough, but you're the best sister anyone could ask for." The room had gone completely still. I could feel hundreds of eyes on me, on Ethan, on Rachel. For a moment, it felt like no one even breathed. Then Ethan spoke again, his voice small but resolute. My mom never missed anything important for Auntie Rachel. Even when we were supposed to go to Disney World but canceled because Auntie Rachel needed help picking her wedding dress. He paused, looking directly at Rachel. So why did everyone forget about her today? The silence that followed was deafening. I finally broke from my frozen state and moved toward my son. Ethan, that's enough, sweetie, I whispered, placing my hands on his shoulders. But before I could guide him away, Rachel stood up from the head table. Her face was pale beneath her makeup, her eyes wide and glistening with tears. Jessica, she said, her voice cutting through the silence. Wait. Rachel stood there, tears streaming down her face, ruining her perfect makeup. The entire reception hall was silent. Even the servers had stopped moving, trays balanced in midair. For a moment, I wished I could disappear, melt into the expensive carpeting beneath my feet. But Ethan's small hand found mine and squeezed tight, anchoring me to the spot. Rachel stepped away from the head table, her white gown rustling with each step. She moved across the dance floor as if in a trance, her eyes never leaving mine. When she reached us, she stopped, seemingly at a loss for words. I didn't. She started, then swallowed hard. I never meant to. I could see something crumbling behind her eyes, the perfect facade she'd maintained for so long. The carefully constructed narrative where she was the star, and I was barely a footnote. All this time, she whispered, you've been there, every time, and today, of all days. I shook my head, desperate to stop this public display. Rachel, it's your wedding. Let's not— No, she cut me off, her voice suddenly stronger. She turned to face the crowd of stunned guests. No, this needs to be said. Rachel took the microphone from Ethan, who relinquished it with a solemn nod that seemed far too mature for his 8 years. I need to correct something, Rachel announced, her voice wavering but determined. A terrible oversight. Jessica isn't just my extended family or friend as Vanessa described. She's my sister, my only sister, and her voice broke. I've taken her for granted for far too long. A murmur swept through the crowd. I saw Eleanor's face go pale. Robert looked down at his hands. Those recordings you just heard? That's just a fraction of the times Jess has rescued me, supported me, loved me even when I was unlovable. Rachel turned back to me. And what did I do in return? I relegated you to the back corner of my wedding. I let everyone forget you existed. She stepped closer, reaching for my free hand. I got so caught up in creating the perfect day, the perfect image, I forgot what really matters. I forgot who's always mattered. I couldn't speak. The lump in my throat was too large, the emotions too raw. I'm so sorry, Jessica, Rachel said, her mascara creating rivers down her cheeks. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm asking for it anyway. The silence that followed felt endless. I was acutely aware of hundreds of eyes on us, of Ethan's, hand in mine, of Luke, who had appeared at my side, wide-eyed and confused by the drama unfolding. What happened next surprised even me. I started laughing, not mockingly, but with genuine relief. The tension that had built up over years, the careful facade I'd maintained, the hurt I'd swallowed down, it all came bursting out as laughter tinged with tears. You picked a hell of a time for this revelation, I said, my voice thick with emotion. A hesitant smile flickered across Rachel's tear-stained face. Better late than never? I shook my head, but found myself stepping forward, pulling her into a hug. She collapsed against me, sobbing now in earnest, uncaring about her makeup or her perfect image. I'm sorry, she whispered against my shoulder. I'm so sorry. Over Rachel's shoulder, I saw David approaching cautiously. He stopped beside us, placing a gentle hand on Rachel's back. "I think," he said quietly, "we need to rearrange some seating." Within minutes, the entire reception had shifted. Staff hurried to add chairs to the head table. Eleanor and Robert stood awkwardly to the side as James, Ethan, Luke, and I were ushered to seats of honor beside the bride and groom. As we settled in, Vanessa approached, looking mortified. "Jessica, I had no idea," she stammered. "The way Rachel talked about friends being like family, I just assumed—" "It's okay," I cut her off gently. "You didn't know because we didn't show you." I glanced at Rachel meaningfully. Vanessa nodded, then asked hesitantly, "Would it be okay if I amended my toast?" 10 minutes later, Vanessa was back at the microphone. "I need to correct an unforgivable oversight in my earlier speech," she began. "Rachel is blessed not just with wonderful parents, but with an incredible sister, Jessica." She went on to share several stories Rachel had told her over the years, stories I hadn't realized Rachel had shared, where I was the hero, the supporter, the confidant. With each anecdote, Rachel squeezed my hand under the table. When the father-daughter dance began, Robert unexpectedly extended his hand to me as well. "My 2 daughters," he announced, his voice gruff with emotion. "Both of you." Later, as the celebration continued with a lightness that hadn't been there before, Eleanor approached me at the dessert table. "I failed you," she said simply. "For years, I failed to see how much you gave and how little you received in return." I started to brush it off, my instinctive response to any recognition of the imbalance, but stopped myself. "Yes," I said instead. "You did." Eleanor nodded, accepting the truth without excuses. "I can't change the past, but I'd like to do better going forward, if you'll let me." It wasn't a perfect resolution. Decades of patterns don't change in a single evening. But it was a start, an acknowledgment of worth that had been long overdue. As the night wound down, I found Ethan sitting quietly at the head table, observing the dancing couples with a satisfied expression. "That was quite something you did tonight," I said, taking the seat beside him. He shrugged. "You always tell us to stand up when something's not fair. Nobody was standing up for you." I wrapped my arm around his shoulders, overcome with love. For this small person with such a big sense of justice. "When did you get so wise?" "From you, Mom," he answered simply. Rachel joined us moments later, kicking off her heels with a groan of relief. "Some wedding, huh?" She laughed, her makeup still smudged despite attempts to repair it. "Memorable," I agreed. "The thing is," Rachel said, suddenly serious, "Ethan was right. You've always been there for me, and I've been, well, selfish." "You were," Ethan piped up before I could answer. Rachel winced, then nodded. "I deserved that." "Maybe a little," I admitted with a small smile. "But we're family. Real family. That means we get to mess up and still find our way back to each other." As the music played and guests continued dancing, something shifted inside me. For the first time in years, perhaps ever, I didn't feel like a supporting character in someone else's story. I was the heroine of my own, a woman who had loved fiercely and consistently, who had raised a son brave enough to speak truth to power, who had finally been seen. Rachel leaned her head on my shoulder, a gesture so reminiscent of our childhood that it made my heart ache. "Thank you for not giving up on me," she whispered. "Never," I promised. "That's what sisters do." Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.